Welcome to Lynnwood Election Watch 2013. I'm Teresa Wippel, publisher of Lynnwood Today, an online gathering place for neighbors and friends in Lynnwood, and we are here tonight with Ian Cotton, who is a candidate for Council Position 2 on the Lynnwood City Council. Welcome to the show tonight.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you having me.
You bet. We always start out with the easy questions, and that is just we'd love to have you talk about yourself and tell folks why you're interested in running for the City Council.
Thank you. I'm native Lynnwoodian, if that's the proper term for us here. Born and raised in Lynnwood. My wife of 10 years and I just moved out of our condo in Lynnwood and to our first home here in the city. And when you make an investment like that, you start to ask, what's happening in the city and on the civic level in government? And so in January, I started attending council meetings pretty regularly just to see what was going on. And after attending, I think 3 or 4 meetings, I decided that local government was for me, and that I had a unique voice to bring to the table of local government that our city really needed.
Mm-hmm. And your background is as an electrical engineer, is that right?
Yeah, so I went to school at the UW and earned my Bachelor's of Science in Electrical Engineering while working nights in manufacturing. So thankfully I'm not somebody who needs a lot of sleep, otherwise I would have been in trouble. But hats off to my wife, because she was really the glue that held it together there towards the end, helping out and making sure I studied and had coffee and all that. So, but yeah, and now I've been doing electrical engineering for about 7 years now, and I love it. I enjoy it. I'm really fortunate to be somebody that does what I thoroughly enjoy. So
that is a rare thing for some folks, I think.
Yeah.
And you are on the Lynnwood Planning Commission?
Yes, I was recently appointed to the Planning Commission. I thought it was a good place to start getting involved in local government. There was an open position since, I believe, 2011 or 12, and so I threw my hat in the ring and was interviewed and appointed.
That's great. Well, we've got some questions here that have been compiled from people who have kind of been tracking some of the issues in Lynnwood, and one of the things that I think has been in the news quite a bit lately has been the whole Link Light Rail extension into Lynnwood, and some discussions about where the operations and maintenance facilities should be located. And I know that the council, although you're not on the council, did take a vote opposing it being located in Lynnwood.
Absolutely.
So if you could just share maybe some of your views on, kind of what maybe is in the best interest from your perspective of Lynnwood citizens on that issue, and kind of how the city could best help residents deal with all the changes that that's going to bring.
Oh, absolutely. It's a huge thing. Light rail coming to Lynnwood is really going to put us on the map as a city, right now on paper we're touted as a regional growth center, but once light rail lands in Lynnwood, Lynnwood's going to experience much more drastic growth than it already has. I'm glad that the council has moved forward with opposing the yard there on the school district's property, because that property is already slated for other uses. Also, it sounds like if they put the rail yard there, they'll still need to put a maintenance yard of some kind in Bellevue anyway. So I think that really right now the option of having one facility, locating it in an industrial area of Bellevue is really the best. And then also, if and when the voters approve ST3, there's plenty of wide open space to the north of us where a rail yard can be located without really creating a hardship on the school district, because that is kind of part of the school district's long-term plan, is to co-locate all of their operations. So, and from a council standpoint, I think really just informing the citizens. I think Light Rail is doing a really good job. Sound Transit is doing a really good job of having community meetings, but I'd really be interested to see kind of what people who live in neighborhoods who already have light rail, what kind of their exit interviews or exit opinions are of how people that lived through that life cycle, what kind of rating do they give Sound Transit, and does Sound Transit do a really good job of informing the people and also being sensitive to the neighborhoods that they come through. So I think as a city council, that's really going to be our job, is to keep the citizens involved and engaged throughout the process, to make sure that they are not just being a voice, but they're also listening to what's happening, so that we as a community can really make the right decision for our community on how Sound Transit receives our input and what they do with it.
And, as you look at, this is one of many issues, obviously, that the council is addressing, and you're an outsider looking in, which is kind of a nice place to be in some ways.
Keep perspective that way a little bit, yeah.
Yeah. What do you think the council, and you don't have to single out any one council member, but what do you think the council as a whole does well, and what could it do better in terms of just kind of engaging citizens and, doing the jobs that they do on a regular basis?
Yeah, I think the council does a very good job of coming from different perspectives. I think there's enough, healthy tension on the council that things really get vetted properly. You want to make sure that you don't want everybody on a governing board to be of the same mindset, because then you all have the same blind spot too. And so you don't really see the things that can sneak up on you if you're all from the same background or from the same mindset. So I think that the variety of backgrounds and mindsets currently on the council is a healthy one. I think the council could always do a better job of listening to the citizens. Really, one of the things that I've kind of is one of the key pieces of my platform is I'd love to see the Lynnwood vision, the thing that the citizens spent. 4,000 citizens came out, they committed their time, and a smaller group then, spent hours working through and dialoguing about what do we want our city to look like, and what do we want it to look like in the future, and what are the values of our city as as citizens, what's our identity. And since the citizens created that vision, there hasn't really been any push to bring that in as any kind of policy document into local government for deciding where money goes, what kind of programs the city offers. And so I think the council could do a much better job. And one of the reasons why I'm running is because I would really like to see the vision that the citizens have already said that they want for their city become the city that they've said that they want. And so on every level, I think that that's government's job, is to listen to what its citizens want, because, based on who we are as Lynnwood, we're going to want things that other cities don't, and we're going to not want things other cities do. And that's really going to be up to the citizens to decide, and the council to listen.
And along those lines, is there, I don't know exactly what the vision was that Lynnwood citizens had come up with. I'm not sure how long ago, if that was a few years ago or... It was
2007, I believe,
okay.
Or 9, somewhere in there.
Is there, if you were going to describe an identity for Lynnwood, what would you say? Because I think there are some people I talk to who say, there's just so much going on there, and there's the mall, and there's this, and there's that, but I'm not even sure really where the city center in Lynnwood is.
Yeah, that's... I think that's the running inside joke in Lynnwood is, where's the city center at? No, and, the Planning Commission previous to me and the City Council has done a really good job, I think, of identifying a city center. But to your question, I think that Lynnwood is in kind of we're almost at an internal juxtaposition to ourselves, because for the longest time we were that small town. There's a lot of single-family residences. I mean, we live in one of them. We also came from a condo. We lived in the multifamily. And so Lynnwood is kind of the city that has the desire to hold on to its past as a small town feel, where people can raise their families, where you can have your kids walk to the park and walk home at dusk with their friends and not worry about them or their safety. But then there's also that added tension where we sit on the crossroads of 405, I-5, 524. We connect the water to the mountains, the south to the north, and growth is going to come whether we, I want to say want it or not, but growth is coming to Lynnwood, and we really need to do an effective and thoughtful job of managing where we want that to go in order to steer it that direction, or else it's just going to kind of happen haphazardly. And that's not, I think, a city that any of us are really going to want to have or be proud of. Whereas if we can consciously drive the future vision of Lynnwood and steer growth towards where we want, then at least we have input and at least we're saying where we want it to go, and we can at least get it turned that direction. So I think, apologize, I'm a little bit of a rabbit trailer, but back circling onto the question, I think that the vision for Lynnwood the citizens have for themselves is they know, but there's also a lot of these things that are pressures from the outside happening, and so people need to understand what those pressures are, and then they have to realize how they want to make their city go in order to have a city that they can be proud of and they can love to live in, because you don't want to not like where you live. That would be sad.
Right. And it probably comes back to what you said about, having a vision that they're sharing with the council and hoping the council listens to what they're saying. So they're kind of
precisely.
They were circling around to the idea there.
Thanks for trying it out.
So, another hot button issue that we've certainly all of us have heard about, and I know probably some people in Lynnwood are tired of talking about, but that's the red light cameras. Do you think that whole issue has kind of gone away for most people? Do they care about it anymore? Is it something that keeps coming up among residents that you talk to?
It kind of comes and goes. I think it comes and goes with what's popular amongst people to talk about. I think that probably the majority of people I talk to swing on the side of the spectrum from indifferent to not really happy that they're there. So I would be open to listening to input from the citizens about what they want. I'm an engineer, so I'm very analytical, so I would, as a representative for the citizens, I would listen to what they have to say, and then I would go and I would do research and find, what do the safety records say? What does the revenue stream say? I'm sure that there are costs associated with maintaining that, and then there's costs associated with, the citizens having to deal with it, and then there's the safety questions. So I think all those things need to be brought together and then presented in a thoughtful and clear way. And then, if citizens don't want them, let's take them out. If citizens are indifferent or, there is some real driving evidence that they are worthwhile to have, then let's discuss that. But I'm certainly open to listening whatever people of the city want to say about them, because that's a role of city government, is to listen to the people that you represent. So,
I know that one of the issues related to the cameras is just the revenue generation, as you mentioned, and of course Lynnwood, like many city governments, is having financial pressures brought to bear by the recession and the lack of sales tax revenue and property tax revenue, and state government kind of being in its own state of craziness.
Yeah.
So how do you see, again, more as, I guess, an outsider sort of compared to some of the other folks, but how do you see addressing those issues as a council member? Was there kind of an approach that you would take to figuring out how to get the city on some firm financial footing?
Absolutely. I think that there's, in business, you always talk about you never want to you only want to cut fat. You don't want to cut muscle, so when you're making cuts. And I think that really local government, we can use the Lynnwood vision as a driving document and say what services line up with what the citizens have asked for. The citizens have asked for increased police presence. They've asked for safe communities. They've asked for sustainable communities, and they've asked for traffic mitigation. And so, there are many other bullet points that go along with that. But those are all kind of, if you sift through what's in that vision, there are things you can kind of start to pull out and say, okay, the citizens have asked for really core services, and they haven't asked for a whole lot of bells and whistles. So that also means that that's really what the citizens are willing to pay for. And so I think lining up our city's budget with what the citizens are willing to pay for, and then using innovation and maybe some new practices or looking at new ways of doing things in order to streamline those things. I think that I don't think that there's any pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. I don't think that there's some magic chest of tax revenue somewhere that's going to magically fix it, because that, there are people with a lot more credentials and know-how in finances than I'm sure, working on it, and they haven't found it. So, I'll look, but I don't think there's going to be any kind of, there's no get out of jail free card. Mm-hmm. You have to say, what do you want? You have to say, what do you want and what do you not want to pay for? And
we have to fess up that we're actually doing this from the Edmonds waterfront. We were wondering how if we'd ever get away through all these interviews without having the train whistle so loud that people would say, "You're not in Lynnwood," but now we're not in Lynnwood.
I guess it was on my watch. I don't know. But yeah, I think that there's no magic bullet answer to this, mm-hmm. and I think that it's going to take dialogue in a real earnest and constructive setting, and say, okay, this is the things that the citizens want. They have made no mention of this. So let's talk about either cutting back on or eliminating these programs if the citizens have not specifically asked for them, because then they're probably not willing to pay for them either. Now, there are some core services that, citizens, haven't asked for that you probably need. You need your clerical staff, you need your finance department, things like that. That's not in the vision, but that all kind of comes with having local government. Mm-hmm. But I think that as we go down the line items of what we spend money on as a city, I think that we also need to be thinking at the same time, in parallel with what we're spending money on, also keep just in the back of our minds as decision makers, is this what the citizens asked for? And if not, maybe it's time to talk about putting this one over in this pile where we go back and we go through these things and we say, did they ask for it? Do they want it? How much does it cost? And can we cut back on it, or can we eliminate it? Mm-hmm. So.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about the small business climate in Lynnwood, because some feedback I've received from some small business owners who've located in Lynnwood recently indicate that they don't necessarily think it's a friendly place for businesses to locate. And I'm wondering if you've heard that, or if you have any feelings about that one way or the other.
So Lynnwood, I do, yes. I've heard and I have feelings. So I've heard a similar thing. I've heard that there are codes and also fees that business owners either can't pay, or they can go somewhere else and not have to pay them. I think that we do have a distinct advantage in our city in that we are located very centrally. People pass through us on their way from one thing to another. They come to our rec center, they come to our mall, they come there and they spend money. So there are certain things that we can leverage to say, well, there is a higher cost of doing business here because we draw extra people here, because we have things in place. But I think that only gets you so far. You have to balance that and meet people in the middle. If you're setting the table and saying you have access to more revenue, if you put your business in Lynnwood, there is probably a higher cost for the infrastructure and the things in order to back all that other things up. But I know that when we entered the Great Recession, Lynnwood had a financial portfolio that was very heavily weighted on sales tax. And so when everybody either suffered a hardship with a job loss, or one income earner lost their job, or they experienced furloughs at work, or whatever, there were hardships across the board, the city's financials looked dire. And so there was, I believe, a lot of firefighting that happened on the council level and just all throughout governments all across the country, where people had to plug the gaps mm-hmm. in order to keep core services running. And that's understandable, but I see us coming out of that slowly. I don't think we're hitting any kind of boom season or bubble, and there's not, certainly a money tree growing somewhere. If there is, please tell me about it. But I think that we need to say, okay, we're coming out of it. I believe the last financials for the city showed us $920,000 positive for the quarter. So, now I believe that was projected. That wasn't the final report, but it was out there that, okay, we've got more money coming in now than going out. And I believe that if that trend continues through this year and into 2014, then we can start to say, okay, where did we make the most drastic increases, and where can we give back some to the citizens or businesses? And if businesses are really still a large part of our economic engine as a city, then let's talk about rewarding some of that to get some of those businesses in. I know that if you drive around Lynnwood or you live in Lynnwood, you know all the storefronts that have sat vacant for over a year. And you're like, man, I remember when there was a, ABC there, or, a Hollywood Video used to be there for years, or a Blockbuster, and they're gone. And they've just been sitting there. And I think that there is a little bit of pressure, I think, on the city and the local government and the local departments to try and set the table for businesses, because it's not a business-friendly climate anywhere. And so if we are going to say, as a city government, we're going to generate revenue from you being in our city, I think it also behooves us to make it easy for businesses to come here and do business here. So,
yeah, that makes total sense. Now, there is something that related to this whole issue with the golf course. And the state auditor's report, and apparently some looking into what might happen next. And I guess there was a consultant that was hired, and I understand that report's going to be coming out fairly soon. Do you have any thoughts about kind of what should be happening with the golf course over time?
Yes, my bias is that I think that the golf course is a really great asset to the community that hasn't been invested in a long time. There's financial pressures all around, so that's understandable. I think that the golf course could be our next rec center. It could be the next thing that it's a destination where you can put a pin on the map, and it's in our city borders, and so people come here and they grab breakfast, they go shoot a short 9 or a long 18, and then they go catch a movie with their friends or whatever, and I think it's something we can definitely leverage. I do believe it's something that needs to pay for itself. But up until just several years ago, it did. It retired the $5.1 million bond, and it was a profitable enterprise until the recession hit. And, golf is kind of an extra, just like the movie theaters. Or, if you have a question between, well, I could buy a week's worth of groceries, or we could all go out to a movie, or I could go, shoot a couple rounds of golf. Well, so as people's pocketbooks began to get pinched, so did, the golf just dropped off, But I think that as we're moving forward, the golf course can be made to operate in a profitable manner, and I think that it should. But I also see it as a great asset to the city, and it is something we may need to make a little further investment in if we need to get it to that point where it is a self-sustaining revenue generator. If you own a business, or you have a business, or are in business, you know that you need to invest money in your business every once in a while in order for it to continue to run, or else you fall behind, things fall in disrepair, and people don't come and spend their money, so.
Well, certainly with golf courses closing, and the city of Mountlake Terrace recently closed their golf course, maybe that will bring some more golfers into Lynnwood. It is a beautiful course.
Yeah, hopefully.
Yeah. So some of the statistics I've seen lately, kind of interesting, a snapshot of the city itself, that, Lynnwood, according to the census, most recent census, has a growing number of older people, kind of the baby boomers and beyond. Also, certainly getting more diverse, and the fact that Lynnwood's median household income is actually $18,000 less than Snohomish County, as a whole. Those all put a certain amount of pressure on, government services and, low and moderate income housing and all those kinds of things. How do you think the city can best address kind of those changes in its population over time, especially given all the challenges you have anyway?
Yeah, well, just to speak to the aging population, one of the things I just kind of speaks to my heart a little bit about our community, because, Lynnwood is a city where I grew up. I'm raising my family, and my parents are retiring in it. So I've, all across the spectrum, I know that I know and understand the needs of, I believe a fairly large cross section of the population. I think that we have an outstanding fire department, but if you look at the statistics of the calls per, responder, the Lynnwood Fire Department really bears the brunt of a lot more work than what would be considered a comparable force in a comparable municipality. I think that having the dedicated aid car is great that they have there, but we have a lot of adult homes in Lynnwood, and we've got an aging population. I think that is something we need to look at, is increasing the capacity of our core services to respond to those really public life and limb safety kind of things. City center is going to have high rises in it. The Lynnwood Place development is coming up. There's a lot of things where we need to really think about setting aside some money long term to make sure that when the developments come and when the needs happen, there's something there to cover those, and we don't just react and say, well, how much can we raise taxes? That we've already done our due diligence and planning and projected out. So I think for our aging population, we definitely probably need to bring some more responders on board. I think that's important. I think access to transit is really going to be key for a lot of those below median households. You get a lot of people that rely on public transit to get them from A to B because they are a one car or a no car household. So I do believe that there are a lot of things that we need to leverage as a city, and definitely using an analytical approach and asking what the citizens are willing to pay for and what they need. And then let's provide those things, and let's not get creative with other people's money. Let's give them what they want at the price that they're willing to pay, or try to at least, and do our due diligence to do that. And then be open in communicating with the citizens and say, if you want this, it's going to cost more. So are you willing to pay more?
Okay. All right. Well, that almost could have been your closing statement, but we do have just about a minute left. So if you have one thought in particular that you'd like people to remember about you when they see their ballots coming in the mail in July, you could probably give a summary of that, and then also let people know if there's a website where they can get more information about you.
Thank you. So I'll start with the website just in case I rabbit trail a little bit there over my minute. It's www.cotton4council, COTTON, the number 4, and then council.com. And really just, I was born and raised here. I'm raising my family here. My parents are retiring here. I'm invested in this community, and I think that Lynnwood has a bright future ahead. We have so many things going for us, and we have so much potential, but it's going to take people willing to dig in, look at really down into the nitty-gritty in some cases, and find the money, find the services, look for potentials, and leverage those to the advantage of the citizens for their city. And I think that I'm the right person to do that. And I ask for your vote in this upcoming primary and general elections.
Great. Thank you. Great job. Thanks very much.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate yours. Yeah, this is great.